Hello YouTube! Hello! Back with another speed lab. Another speed lab. I love calling these speed labs even though they take an hour. But I think I explained this once already that they're still speed labs even though they take an hour. Like I usually miss a lot of stuff. At least not a lot sometimes. But at least I miss some things. Most of the time I miss some things. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about Lars. Lars can be very, very annoying. Like a very annoying character, especially in this game. He was already annoying in 7, and he wasn't that strong in 7. But I believe in Tekken 8 he's pretty strong. He's pretty good, because he got a lot of new stuff. A lot of new stuff. And he still retained his usual identity of being a very, very good defensive player just because... Not player, defensive character. Defensive character just because of his punishment is so good. Like he still has a 12 frame wall splat. His punishment with 10 frames got better actually with 2-1. I'm gonna talk about this a little bit later, but this got better. It's very, very good. It comes to punishment. He still has a 14 frame launcher, which is an easy mode 14 frame launcher, right? Mine's 14, you just launch it. Easy mode 15 frame launcher if you need it. And usually you can use it as with punishment pretty reliably, more or less after sidesteps and backdashes. And the long range he still has back 34, which is an amazing with punisher. In my opinion, Lars is most likely is one of the best punishment-based characters in the game right now. Still, he has very, very good punishment, and I mean very good punishment in almost any situation. Only thing he maybe lacks is a 13 framer, but he doesn't really need a good 13 frame punish since he has this, and he can use shoulder as well, but it's not worth it. Okay, so now let's talk about Lars as a character a little bit. Like first gameplay, right? So gameplay wise, as Kaz, you actually have to be very, very careful against Lars because as I said, his punishment is so good, his whiff punishment. So your usual gameplay of throwing out electrics a lot and keeping the Lars player at bay can work, but you have to be much more careful about it. Because the Lars player, if he's good, he will punish you for it. Because as I said, Lars has one of the best whiff punishment tools in the game. With this being so fast and so long range, for example. If they're ready for an electric, they're just gonna punish you with this. Or if they're ready and don't want to be too risky, they're just gonna punish you with an arc blast. Right? At the least. So you have to be very, very careful about stuff like that. Because Lars players with punishment, and Lars as a character with punishment is usually pretty good. So be careful about that game plan. And also when you are going in, it's very, very vital for you to realize that Lars players like to do down back force sometimes. It's a keep out tool. So they can just throw this out like this. And it's very, very hard to deal with just because, you know, it's a high crushing low. It sometimes crushes mids sometimes. I've seen this crush mids. And it's a countered launch with good range. +5. And, you know, countered launcher. Of course, it's very risky. Because you can duck it. Launch it. It's basically like a snake edge in a way, but a fast snake edge. But you get what I mean. So you have to be aware of this. So doing like a dash electric, sometimes you might get countered by a keep out down back forward. Have to be very careful about that. And as a keep out move, Lars has other options as well, like wall standing 2s. But I'll talk about wall standing 2s a little bit later. So wall standing 2. Now, I said I was going to talk about it later. I got distracted. So first I want to talk about some of the most used moves the Lars players do. And one of the most used moves they do, which is something new, is 2-1. I talked about this. This is his 10 frame punish, right? And you'll usually see a Lars player do this a lot, even on block. And the why they do it is because the high mid that comes out really fast, right? It's 10 frame, the 2. And goes into stance, but the Lars player can still block after the stance. So for example, he does 2-1, and you try to punish this, it's -6. Like, it's not even -9, it's -6. You can't do anything against this. But sometimes it's important for you to check the Lars player after 2-1. And the reason why it's so good for you to check him is because so he doesn't utilize the stance he's in. This stance right here. So that spin is actually a new stance that Lars got in this game. It's I don't remember what it's called, but it basically enables a mix-up. A low mid mix-up. So he can either do this low or this mid. This is usually what you're gonna see. Lars player can also cancel this into while standing moves as well. But usually you won't see them. you'll usually see the 2 or 1 options. I'll talk about the while staying moves a little bit later, but now let's talk about the 2 and 1 options. So if he does this 1 option, like that, even on block, this is just gonna high crush. So do not use highs to check after 2-1 on block. Usually good Lars players won't really use this as a pressure tool, but if you let them use it, maybe they'll start doing it anyway. So if you do jabs here, it won't work. That's why a good check, like something like a down forward 4, is pretty vital. But it's a little bit iffy for gods, because if you want to check him, you kind of risk being -9, but it's still worth it. Or a back 2, right? Because at least back 2 has a mind game. So that is pretty useful to know, just to check him. Because it will not only beat the low, it will also beat something like mid, which is 2-1-2. This right here, right? If you do this 2-1-2, and you do a jab, it still won't work. So don't do highs here. Both the options basically high crush. Immediately do a mid check. Something like back 2 is good, just because it has a mind game with back 2 too. Maybe they'll respect it. Something like down forward 4 is good. But if they press a lot, you can also do a down forward 2. Right? You can also do that. You want to counter it. But it's risky to do something that's unsafe just because 2-1 into block exists. If they do 2-1 into block and you do down forward 2, you are going to get punished for it. And as I already said, Lars is pretty good punishment. 4-4. This hurts and sets up a very good Oki situation. So you have to be very, very careful about throwing out down forward 2s for any reason, basically. Gotta be pretty careful. Other than that, 2-1 doesn't have any more mind games, like too much of the mind games. But this stance that I talked about, this stance is usable in many, many situations. Like, for example, this spin in this situation, exactly the same thing. This spin, exactly the same thing. So, just because I talked about that stance, let's talk about down back 3. Down back 1-3. This one. So this move is a low high. That's natural on hit, right? If you do duck it, let's say you duck this. You launch it, right? It is launch punchable because of the high. Can he block? Yes, he can. He can't block after this, which is what I talked about. It's -6, and he can block, which is what creates this strong mind game. So let's talk about this. So usually what you will see after this is either a mix-up just like that one, so this into the 2, right? If you respect this and you let him mix you up, like let's say you duck this, you'll get hit. One of the best things you can do here is either a sidewalk to avoid this, either side, but try mostly go to the left, because you also get his back. But you have to know a very specific punish in this situation, because the highs might whip. So something like this might work as well. So you have to be careful. In something like the low, for example, let's say he does the low. We'll track you. Both sides. So if you sidewalk into a duck, you'll beat most of the options. Look at that tracking, holy shit. That was crazy. Right? So you have to be careful. And that low is -12. You cannot TP it. Yeah, it's basically a homing low. It's very, very good. So, yeah. It's very, very useful to do that, because one of the other options Lars builds also do after this is a while standing 4. So if you do this sidestep, you'll still beat it, or at least avoid it. If you won't be able to punish it sometimes just because you're doing a sidestep duck. But it's very, very useful. And they do this 4 just so you don't check him. So it's -1. So Lars is -1 in this situation. And they're doing this 4 because it's the fast option they have. So you have to not figure this out, but remember that Lars is actually minus here, and sometimes you can press. You actually can. But most checks, unless the 12 frame mid, won't be like a good option. Because this will be the 13 framer, for example. But 12 frame mid will trade with this. So it might be a good option to just check the Lars player so he doesn't do anything too, too annoying. But now let's see one of the most common options, what good Lars players use because it beats sidestepping. It's this into while standing 2. But I don't know how to cancel it well. It's something like this. So they cancel this spin into while standing 2. And they use this for a couple of reasons. One is because it high crushes. This was the case in Tekken 7 as well. It still is the case. So if you jab here, he'll beat you. Something like a Magic 4, which is like a hitbox, will hit him though. But something like a jab or even a 2 jab will not work. In sidesteps, you cannot sidestep against this. This is the main reason they use this. Like that. Just so you don't sidestep him. But if you do press something like down forward 2 or anything among those lines, you will get a counter. Or like a 13 frame check, you know. So sometimes it's good to check him in this situation, but be careful about checking him with highs. Always check with either a good hitbox high, something like a Magic 4, just because this exists, or a good mid, like back to down forward 4 with Gaz, you know, those are good. Down forward 2 for like big reward, if you want that counter hit, if they abuse it too much. But make sure that they're already conditioned to not do this too much, this 4, because this will beat any of your checks unless you do a high check. But that's why I like Magic 4 is one of the best options. Because it's relatively fast, right? And it also trades with this, which makes it pretty good. Trade, you still get that, and it also beats the while standing too. So the Magic 4 is not bad. But you also have to realize that the Lars player can also just, you know, sidestep after this. So the mix-up can be pretty complicated. So if you do just Magic 4 here, and they do something, I don't know, similar to this. Wait. Something like that. You might get launched, because you're always Magic 4ing after it, right? There you go. So don't be too predictable with your options, because the Lars player has a choice to either go into this stance, or not go into the stance. And even if he goes into it, he can still sidestep anyway. So, yeah, be very, very careful about your options there. But one of the best options is either Magic 4, I like it, sidestepping is good, down forward 2 is good, or any kind of mid check is also good. So that's really, really good. But the other situations where Lars players use these stances is in these situations when they're pressuring you and you're too afraid to press buttons. In these kind of situations, something like, let's say he does while standing 2, which he does this, while standing 2, into Sen stance, right? This stance, when he goes low, is called the Sen stance. I think it's silent entry, that's why it's called. And this stance can go into this spin. This is new. Into the mix-up that I talked about. Right? So in these situations, if you respect him too much, you're also gonna get mixed up. So this, you respect it, and he's just gonna mix you up unless you either sidestep or check him. So this is also one of the situations where Lars players use this new stance for mix-up opportunities. Because you're respecting it because of the stances, you know? This stance, it's pretty scary. So it's not unusual for you to, you know, freeze up sometimes and just take the mix-up. But just know your options, is what I'm saying. Since I already covered this, not this one, this move, let's talk about while standing 2 a bit, which is one of the best mids he has. So while standing 2 is a tracking 13 frame mid. It's basically tracking. As you guys saw, in this situation, Lars players use this just for the tracking property. And it has a slight high crushing, which crushes most jabs and the high hitbox highs, basically. So you have to be very, very careful about this move. And this move can also be used as either a mix-up, you know, close up, like this. They mix you up with a low, which is this usually. So this is the low mix-up Lars players have from full crouch, and this is their mid mix-up. I just wanted to mention it because it's one of the things that they could do. Or they can also use it from long range as a check. So they're literally checking you to not come closer. Because this is a tracking move, as I also said, basically a tracking move. It has high crushing, so you can't really jab check it. And it's pretty safe to do because of this back step. So this move, just while standing 2, has a forward step, which is the silent entry, and the back step, which is the dynamic entry. So this is like 2 transitions it can have. And it's a great move for keep out just because of this. it basically goes forward and then goes back instantly. And I mean instantly. So it's very hard to whiff punish. Very, very hard. Unless you're like specifically looking for it. So that's one of the other usages this move has. The other usage is also for pressure. So they're gonna do this into the silent entry stance, which will pressure you. If you respect this, just this, and you don't press anything on block, for example, they will go into this and mix you up, because silent entry has its own mix-ups. I'll cover silent entry like in a bit, but for now I'm gonna explain why you sometimes respect this. The reason why people respect this is because of these follow-ups. This follow-up and the new follow-up, which is a 3. Let's say you don't respect this and you press immediately after, right? You are gonna get countered. This was nerfed. This was a launcher in Tekken 7. They did nerf it. But it's still, you know, something that you should respect sometimes, because he gets a free stomp there. Stomp is guaranteed in that situation. So you have to be careful about pressing too much after while staying 2s. Especially that this exists and this exists. And sometimes even this might avoid your attempts to punish something. Not punish, but check something. So you have to be very, very careful and choose your options correctly. Sometimes it's very good to press, because Lars players love using just this into pressure. Like this into this pressure, or this into down forward 1, or this into back forward. Stuff like this. They love using this. So sometimes checking with the down forward 2, down forward 4, back 2 isn't bad. But just make sure to use a mid. Because some highs will get crushed by this stance. Because, you know, as you can see by the animation, high crushes. Okay, now let's talk about the Sen stance, this stance, which transitions after while staying 2. It can also be done by forward 3 into forward, exactly the same stance. And it can also be done by down back 2 forward. And what else? I forgot. These are like the most common transitions. While staying 2, I think, is the most common one. Okay, so while staying 2 stance, if you do respect it, then you're gonna get mixed up. Now, what's the mix-up options here? So this is the low, usually, that Lars players go for. This is a Sen 2. This stance into the 2. Let's say you respect while staying 2. And then he does the low. So this is a +6 low. That's only -12. And it's a countered launcher. So it's pretty good. It's a pretty good, damn good low. 17 frames fast. But if you do look out for it, sometimes you'll be able to block it. That's what I try to do anyway. But this is basically his low mix-up. You have to look out for this, and this also tracks really, really well. But it doesn't matter the tracking that much, because if you do respect this, most likely you won't be stepping anyway. Okay, so that's the low mix-up. For the mid mix-up, he has this fast version of the 1, which is a heat engager. So if you do commit to a duck, let's say you commit to a duck, and not just try to see the low, you are gonna get punched very hard, 26 damage, that hurts. And heat engager. Not to mention, this is a -6 mid. This got buffed by a lot. It used to be -10, with not as much pushback. It used to have pushback, but not this much. But now it's a -6 mid, with a heat engager property, which still wall splats. And since it's a heat engager, you can also heat dash after it. So it's a very, very good move. One of the reasons, not one of the reasons, one of the things you can do against this is you can sidestep it to the left, but you have to time it correctly. You can also sidewalk it if you don't want to time it, but sidewalk is a little bit riskier. And it has a tendency to sometimes track you. You can also sidewalk to the right, but I think it's more common to the left. Especially in like certain situations. So you have to be very, very careful about this move. Okay, so that's one mid option he has. The other one is 1+2. So 1+2 is another mid option, which is a new option now, which is one of the best options he has in my opinion. But it's a little bit, it's not risky because it's safe, but it's not as pressurey. I don't know the word. It just doesn't add that much pressure. It basically gives you plus frames. So this move is another mid mix-up he has for that low, which is a normal hit knockdown, right? I don't think this wall splats, I'm not too sure. Don't quote me on that, but the normal hit knockdown. And it tracks really, really well. You can sidestep it, not sidestep, sidewalk it most of the time. But you have to time it well. And sometimes, in certain situations, it's basically tracked. Especially to the right. If you do sidestep right, tracking. You cannot sidewalk this. The sidewalk left, it can work. But there are some situations when even that doesn't work. So it depends on the situation, basically. I'm gonna cover some of them. So that's another mid mix-up, and this is another one. So he has a lot of mid mix-ups to choose from, basically. And this 3 is a high reward option that Lars has. If they think you're gonna duck and they really want the combo, like big reward, they're gonna do the 3. So this into the 3, basically. So let's say you're ducking the 2. You're gonna get hit by this, and that's a combo, normal hit combo. The good thing about this is that it's minus 14. It's not safe. I mean, if you're a good Kazuya player, not good, but if you like train this, you can sometimes launch it. Personally, I can't. It's a weird hit stun. There you go, I did it. So you gotta be very, very careful. But you're playing someone like Lars, for example, in the mirror match, you should be launching this. Mango, thank you for following. If you're playing someone like Brian, you should be launching this. Maybe someone like Paul, or someone like Lisa with a good 14 frame punish. Just punish this as much as possible with the best 14 frame punish you have. Because it's important, because it's a normal hit launcher. Very, very important to punish this as well. Okay. Now the other mid option, there's so many mid options, which is also very, very good, is the Sen 3+4. This is one of the best ones he has. So he has only one low from there, but a lot of mids, so you have to keep in mind. So this is a very, very strong mid-mid, which deals 22 damage, knockdown on normal hit. You can just back roll after it. But what makes this so strong is that it's 6 shift damage, forces crouch, right? So you're forced crouch in this situation. And it's 0. And since it's 0, Lars players have a lot of setups after this. So basically, expect the Lars player to do either a jab like 1-2, 1, or even a 1-1 after it. Just because it doesn't look like it's plus or 0. It doesn't look like it. It looks like you're plus. Looks like you can actually take your turn, but you can't. Like if you do while staying 4 there, 1-1-1 will catch you, which is a 10 framer. It's a very, very common setup, so look out for it. 100% look out for it. Okay, but I think that's it about Sen stance, right? Oh, I almost forgot the power crush. I almost forgot about it. So the power crush after Sen stance. This one right here. This move exists right now for the sole purpose of you stopping him from... not stopping him, stopping you from pressing. So, for example, if you try to press after this power crush stops you. If you try to like react to it even a little bit, the power crush will stop you. This is why it exists. And it's especially used like with Lars players, or by Lars players, when you block something. So this into 4. Or this into 1, or this into 2, all these options. Throw. Throw will work, just like jabs will work, because if you have to do a 1-2 or 1-1 there, you can still duck it. But the mix-up is still there because this is a high crush. So only highs will work against the power crush, but mids will not. But if you do a mid, the power crush gets you. But if you do a high, this low gets you. So basically your mid checks get negated by this. Unless your mid check somehow with high crush. Which some characters can do that, but Kazuya can't really do it that well. Or I don't think we have an option like that anyway. Unless you do something like this, which is very slow. Okay, so that's the Sen stance, and the Sen stance options that usually Lars players have. Right? So it's very, very important to notice that. Especially this low. Because this is the only low a Lars player can do after this. So if you do look out for it, it will be much, much better, and you'll be much, much more comfortable in the matchup. Because you'll know, okay, this is the only low that can come out after this. Okay, now let's talk about Den stance. So Den stance, this stance, usually comes out automatically with forward 3 to just mix you up. Usually. It doesn't have a stance transition as much. They can do down forward 3 into it, for example. Or the most common one is while staying 2 into the back step, which also goes into this stance. But usually if they want to pressure you, it will come out automatically, which is a forward 3 input. It's basically like a wave dash. They can even cancel it, like that, right? I messed up. Cancels. So you have to be very, very careful about the stance. But now let's talk about the options that Lars players have. which is a lot, to be honest. They added a lot here. I think they added like 2 lows. So this is one of the lows, 10-4, that they added. You don't see this that much, but this is one of the options he has. I still want to mention this. So this low is kind of linear, usually to the left side more than the right, but it's more or less linear to both sides. It's a 23 frame low, which is minus 12. It is plus on hit, but it doesn't even have a counter hit, right? And that's why you don't see this move that much. You don't see Lars players using this as much. But it also has high crushing properties, like a little bit. But you almost will never see this. Main reason is because he has another low from this, which a lot of Lars players love using. Which is a faster one, 1 frame faster, does more damage, 0.1 damage. And also can transition into a stance, which gives plus frames. Right? So this is the low that you'll usually be seeing as a mix-up after this. This stomp right here. So then stance through +4 is what the input is for this. So this move usually is minus 14, and you would think TP, right? No, no TP. You guys saw that, right? That TP with it. No, don't TP this. Do not do this. Sometimes it can work. Do not TP this. You always while staying 4-4. And there are 2 reasons for this. This is one of the reasons that whiffs, right? Like, this is enough for a reason, in my opinion, for you to not TP this. And that's already enough. But there's another reason for you to not TP it. The second reason is that the Lars player can actually transition into that stance on block. And I talked about this power crush, right? So after that move, this stomp, not that one. This stomp, he transitions into the Sen stance, which is the ducking stance I talked about previously. So this stomp, ducking stance transition. And after that, he can do this power crush. Let me record it. I'm not recording. Which I talked about. But what happens here is that you actually can't do 13 frame moves. Because suddenly, it doesn't work. Right? That's why it's very, very important to do a wall stanger 4-4 here. It's very, very important. I'm not too sure if 12 frame moves work here, but we don't have a 12 frame punisher. It's a Kazuya player anyway. So it's very, very important to do a wall stanger 4-4. Very important. Okay. If you do block it. But if you do get hit, then you have to take the mix-up. This mix-up right here. And the mix-up I already covered, but it's a little bit more different because you're actually in minus frames. So this is the low option they have, as I already said. If you don't guess right, you are gonna get hit by this. And usually what the Lars player does is the 1 as a mid option. What's the next character? Paul. So the mid option is very strong because you can't really do much about this. Right? One thing you can do is punch parry it. It's a Kazuya play, but you can't step this. It's a very, very good option. But punch parry is one of the options you can do, or a power crush. Both of them can work. But it's very strong because you can't do anything else. You can also rage art, obviously. And the rage art's a more or less decent option here, because if they do transition into this stance, they can't really block. But look out for this. This into Sen stance, and I already covered Sen stance mix-up, so you already know what to expect. But now there's one more thing I really need to cover, which kind of changed the dynamic of the Sen stance mix-up. Which is why I think he became like a lot stronger than Tekken 7. Because in Sen stance, for example, you can just look out for this and the other mids he has, because that's the only low he has, right? As I already mentioned. But now what they added is that this Sen stance, the ducking stance, can transition into this stance. I don't know what it's called. Lion's entry. I don't know, whatever, legendary entry, something like that, that's what it's called. So this stance can do this spin motion and transition into this one, which enables this low, which I already talked about, right? The same low in the same stance with this stance is. It's exactly the same. And enables this mid. So if you respect this too much, something like this might happen, right? This stomp, this transition into a mix-up. So something like this can happen. And you might get confused on what the hell's happening, right? Lars player is just dancing around, what the fuck? But that's what's happening. If you respecting the Sen mix-up too much, like way too much, and not pressing, then they might do this and mix you up. They might either do the stance options or full crouch options like I talked about, because they can cancel this into full crouch options, like that full crouch low. Zero, hello. Bats calls, hello. So be very, very careful about this. Be very, very careful. This is one of the options he has. Okay, I think I covered the stances. More or less I covered the stances. Holy shit. Okay, that took a long time. Now let's talk about his good lows and good mids. First, let's start with lows. I'm going to talk... no, actually, let's start with mids. I think I always start with mids, so let's do that. So one of the best mids he usually uses is forward 1+2. I got the stances out of the way because I was like, okay, let's get these out of the way first, because it's just too much to cover. So forward 1+2. This is one of the best mids you can use in the neutral, just because it has very good range, as you guys can see. It's a shoulder, you can't even parry it even if you wanted it, right? It's either a shoulder or an elbow, I can't really tell. But yeah, -9, it's safe, creates a lot of space, which is very strong. And most of all, it's a countered launcher that does a lot of damage. So if you do this, I'm guessing a good Lars player will deal at least 80 damage. I'm pretty sure that was not optimal. It still did 79 damage, right? So at least 80 damage from this. So that's why it's so strong. Very, very good. The main way you have to deal with this is either sidestep it to the right at the correct timing, or when you block this, it's very important to do a long range check. If you want to check the Lars player, never do something that doesn't have range. Because what this enables the Lars player to do is this immediately transitions to something that I call what's it called? A pushback, yeah. A pushback setup. So if this pushes back, they can backdash once, make anything whiff that you do, basically anything, unless you have very good range on your move. And then whiff punish you for it, because as I said, Lars is one of those characters that has a very, very good punishment. They can either do this, or if they're too far, they can even do this. This is one of my favorite whiff punishes in the game, back 3-4. It's very, very good. So be very careful about that. On block, very, very careful. If you want to like punish it, you have to sidestep it. But it's gonna be hard, especially because it's a forward move. If the Lars player is good, he will actually make this track. Forward 1+2. It becomes tracking a little bit if they time it correctly. So you have to be careful. It's a very, very strong move. Okay. What else? Back 4 is one of my favorite mids as well. Let's talk about back 4. So back 4 is a 15 framer knee, which is -8. Safe. It also has the same weakness as forward 1+2 does, but it's a way shorter range because it's not a forward move, and the move itself is very, very different, obviously. And the way you deal with this is you just sidestep to the right and launch it. Because otherwise, if you go to the left a bit, it might track just a bit. There you go. It has a slight track to the left. But it doesn't have that kind of track to the right. Technically you can sidestep it both sides, but it's way more optimal to sidestep to the right. And what makes this move so good is that it's basically a mini launcher, right? It transitions into this on counter hit and does 55 damage, which in my opinion is the coolest things in the game. One of the coolest things in the game. I really like this move. So yeah, be very, very careful about back 4. It's very, very strong. Now let's talk about down forward 1, which is basically a staple down forward 1 that Lars has. So it's the 13 frame mid. That's -1. Usually it's like this. And it can be stepped more or less either side, but it has slight tracking. And to either side. As you guys can see, this is not easily steppable. If you walk it, it's doable sometimes. But it's not easily doable. It's pretty hard to step this. It's usually a sidewalk right. So if you do want to sidestep with Lars, usually you have to go to the right. Right? So down forward 1 is one of those moves. Especially the -1 there. Can create a situation like this into 1-1. So if you do something like this, like a 13 frame check, or back 2, or try to forward 3, something like this will catch you. So you have to be careful. Mind you, hello. So be very, very careful about this. And since I talked about 1-1, let's talk about this move as well. So 1-1 is basically Lars' 10 frame move. That is a natural uncountered. So 1-1-1. This is all natural uncountered. So counter it 1-1-1. Let me actually record this. So if you do press, all this is guaranteed into a heat engager. But you have to remember that this is -12. This is very, very important. It used to be -14 in the previous game. So people that comes from Tekken 7, you have to remember it's not -14 anymore. Especially the Brian players or Paul players that used to launch this, right? You can't launch this anymore. You have to punish it with a Paul framer now, if you do block it. Other than that, okay, Paul, thank you for following. Other than that, you can also sidestep it, but beware that the second hit has very, very good tracking. Like, let's showcase that. I'm gonna sidewalk into a block. I'm gonna block this. I cannot make this evade. Not make this evade. You get what I mean? I cannot evade this. Unless I fully commit to sidewalk right. Fully. So that's one of the ways to deal with it. Okay. So 1-1 is a very, very good tool, and the Lars players will usually use this to check you in many, many situations. Like down forward 1 into 1-1 is one of the situations, obviously. Okay, now let's talk about another mid which got changed. Not this one. This one right here. I don't think people talk about this move enough. This move is a pretty decent move. So this is one of the setups you can do as well. Because if you down forward 1 and jab, for example, at a bad timing, this will crush it. The slight crushing. If you do an instant jab, you'll actually beat it. If you don't do an instant jab, it will beat you. Or if you do something slow. Like a slow high, a slow jab basically. This setup isn't used that much, but there are other moves that the Lars player can use as a setup. I'm not too sure about the moves exactly, but this is basically a move the Lars player is used to crush highs. But now, why is it so good? Well, it's a tracking move, right? I'm pretty sure you guys can see the tracking particles. So you cannot step this. This is a tracking move. The Lars player can also use this as a tracking move. The mid tracking move is pretty good, but it doesn't have a counter prop, right? At least. But what makes it so good is that it's safe. So this move used to be -12 in the previous game. It's safe now. So it's a tracking mid that's safe. It also has a bit of high crushing. It's on the slower side, which is 22. I think 22 or 21. 21. Okay. But it's safe. So it's very, very good to use it sometimes. Either as a tracking tool, checking tool, or a high crushing tool. Basically, jab crushing tool. So you have to be very careful about this move. And make sure to not punish it. As I said, it used to be punishable. Not anymore. But you're -9, right in his face. So sometimes, hell sweep him. Not bad. Make him scared. Down back 4. Jabs. Down forward 2. All the good shit. It's basically a -9 situation. Okay. So be careful about that move as well. Back 4 I covered. Down forward 1. Oh, down forward 2. I should cover this as well. This is also a new move, which is decent mid. So down forward 2 is a 14 frame mid, which is new. And usually it's -11. So if he does something like this, it's actually punishable. But this situation will almost never happen. And I do not even recommend punishing this most of the time, unless the Lars player is too predictable with down forward 2s. Now why do I say this? I say this because down forward 2 transitions into a stance. So this move is one of the moves that transitions into a stance like Wall Stang 2 does. This one, Sen stance. Right? And this stance we already know the mix-ups it has because I already covered it. So if you do something like a back 1-2 to punish it, let's say I do back 1-2 because it's -11, right? You're gonna get countered launched. Even if I do 1-1-2, countered launch. Right? So you have to be very, very careful about your options here and what you choose to do. Because this, which usually becomes -11, which is usually -11, becomes -3. So you have to actually check him with something like a down forward 4 here. Do something. But as I already said and mentioned about the mix-up about this stance is that he has a power crush. So if you do check him with a mid, this is gonna beat you. That's why you might sometimes see this so often. Down for 2 cent stance. If you do jabs, like a 1 or a 1-1, I'm sure 1-1 works. It can be good. But if you do something like a mid, you will get beaten. But the 1-1 is a decent option. 1-1 is pretty decent just because of this. But, as I said, if you want 1, you're gonna get counter launched by this. I demonstrated that already. So you have to be very careful and respect this mix-up, because there's a low here, right? The mid, which I already covered. And I already covered that this stance can also transition into this spin. New stance, right? Okay, that's heat. I'm gonna talk about heat later. I always talk about heat in the end. So be very, very careful about that. Other than that, there's also a few things I wanted to mention. One of them is this one right here. This is one of the most BS moves he has. It's very, very strong and it's very, very bullshit. Very. So what this does is it evades everything, basically. So imagine Akuma's flip from the previous game if you played the previous game. It's basically something like this. So it's very, very strong. And Lars players can do something like this. So let's say you want to jab him. Goodbye jabs. Right? Unless you do something like a good mid. You know, something like back 2 can work. Down forward 1 can work. I think all these moves can work. But don't do highs. Goodbye to your jabs, right? So this is basically a setup. And why is it so strong? It's so strong because it's safe. Not only is it safe, it's -4. You can step it, but it's very hard to punish. Because it can sometimes track you, especially if you sidestep to the left. So, yeah, it's a very, very good move. So it's a move that basically avoids everything. That's 40 damage. That's a lot of damage. It's -4 and is a mid. So you have to be very, very careful. Very careful about something like this. One of the most common setups I see that Lars players use is when you heat burst them. Let's say I'm the Kazuya player, right? Obviously. I heat burst and they block it. They're gonna jump. That's one of the most common things. They're jumping after this. Once I played against a Lars player that did this, and what I did to counter the jump was literally this. This is what I did. That was a hard read, right? I knew he was gonna jump and I just did this. Just to counter it. But yeah, just expect some stuff like that in certain situations. The heat burst being one of them. Okay. So that jump I already covered. Would laser work? Yes. Yes, it would work. If you're in Devil, it would work. I think I missed something. I think I missed this. So when I was talking about the dense stance, let me get back to the dense stance a little bit. I actually missed some of the options because I got too distracted by the stomp. So let's actually get back to the dense stance, so I want to mention the moves he has. So this stomp is the low, obviously. But there's also a mid, which is this one, the 2. The +7 mid, that is safe. -7. I thought it was more than that. But it's -7. It tracks pretty well. If I step a little bit, it will still track me, basically. Unless I sidewalk this, more or less this will track me. So you have to be sidewalking this. So it's a safe mid, that's a countered launcher. So it's a very, very good mid option that they have, that they can mix up with this. It's pretty good. And I almost forgot to mention as well that this also has a counter property. You saw that, right? What that counter property does is that this actually guarantees this. This is guaranteed. It's pretty strong. It's very, very good. That's why Lars players love using this. It's very strong. Game. And the other option he has, which is most commonly used in neutral situations or after this particular move, is then 1-2. This is also a very BS move. It's very, very BS because they changed this. So this is a high, right? Then 1-2. But the thing about this move is that you cannot duck the second hit. This used to be duckable. They made it jelly. You cannot duck it anymore. So if you want to avoid this, you have to duck both of them. Something like this. Oh, and I forgot to mention this basically tracking. It basically tracks. I know I'm stepping it right now, but it's not reliable to step in a real match. It basically tracks. Is the way Lars players usually use it. Let me just demonstrate it a little bit. Just so you guys can see it as well. A little bit further range. When you try to step it, it will just clip you. Let me demonstrate the clipping just a little bit there. Not that. There we go. I wanted to demonstrate the second hit clipping you. So you have to be very, very careful. I'll play a character. Gotcha, bro. I'll play a character after this. So you have to be very, very careful. So it's basically a tracking move. Basically. That's a high, but it jails. And it's -6. So, yeah. Be very careful about this move. And the most common way they use it is this into this. This is one of the most common ones. And since I talk about this one right here, the other most common thing they do is this one. I almost forgot the 3. How did I forget the 3? Oh my god, I have to talk about. Okay. First, let's talk about the 1+2. How did I forget the 3? Most BS move he has. Okay. So this is 1+2, then 1+2. Mish, thank you for follow. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. So this move is basically used to stop you from trying to dash it into a button. Like if you try dash like this, for example, if you're not too fast, you will get hit by the 1+2. It's basically a don't get close to me tool. Sir, thank you for follow. So that's why they use it so much. It's the same with 1-2, and it's the same with this one. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention about this particular move. This is a normal hit launcher. It's not countered. Not countered at all. Backswing blow. It's not a backswing blow per se. It's like a stance transition that basically is like a backswing blow. So yeah, I have to be careful about it. Okay. And now let's talk about one of the most BS moves he has, which is, to be honest, it's kind of crazy. So then 3. I almost forgot to mention this. How did I forget this? Good thing I remembered. So then 3. Previously, Den 3 was different in the previous game, but now it's this, which is a mid-tracking, jumping move, right? So it will also low crush. You can't parry this jumping move. Don't forget, in Tekken 8 you can parry jumping moves. It's a heat engager. Let me record it just so I can show you guys the properties. So, you can't step it mid-tracking. And it has infinite range, you can't backdash it. And +3 on block. Fun, right? So this move is very, very strong. It's very, very strong. Because the mind games he can utilize after this is very good. Lars players might say, oh, just sidestep left, right? And why do they say this? I will actually explain why they say something like this, right? Sidestep left duck is what they say. So when you block this... I have to make him block it, wait. How do I launch it? Something like this, I guess. Okay, I was mashing, maybe it will work. So if you block this, usually the 1 is what's gonna come out. If you do sidestep left duck, you'll actually avoid this, right? So this is why Lars players are gonna say, okay, it's not that strong, just sidestep left into a duck. You'll avoid the 1, and you'll also avoid the low, right? And I agree, this is one of the best good options you can do. It's not bad at all. But the problem lies in many other stuff. Like we already know Sen mix-ups, right? That 1 can be avoided by sidestep left, you can actually electric there. And if you do a duck, you also avoid this, which you know, what the duck is for. But now comes the problematic moves. The problematic moves here is this, which catches you. I don't know why this catches you, by the way. This just purely catches you. Nice sidestep left duck, by the way. So this catches you. Does good damage. Immediately knocks you down. And not to mention, it's 0. I already covered this move and how good this is, right? So this is a problematic move, because now you can't deal with that. What can you do against this, you might ask? Well, you can dash it. Not dash, jab it. and it will trade. But you don't even get anything out of it. You can't do shit. This is not worth it. He actually deals more damage against you as well. Right? You can't even down jab it. Down jab actually just gets jumped over. You get power crush through it. Right? Which can work. But I'm not too sure if it's too worth it. Maybe it is worth to get out of pressure. But the power crush is really, really good because not only does it beat that, it also beats all the other mid options. Like that one. It also beats that. And now let's talk about the other problematic move which beats the sidestep. Okay, hopefully it recorded that. It's the stance 1+2 that I talked about, which I said that in some situations it tracks really well. See that? You cannot step this. Problematic move. You also cannot magic for it. You can jab this, but as I said, jabbing is not worth it. But power crush is a very good option. It's a very, very good option for all the mids. But now let's see what the problem with power crushing is. You might say, okay, they just power crush then, right? Why not power crush? Because all the mids get beaten by the power crush. Well, right? I'm trying to record this. The main issue about power crushing is the two. This one. When you're risking a launch like this, it's very, very risky. That deals a lot of damage too. It insta tornadoes, but it can deal a lot of damage. I don't know the actual damage here, what I can do, but I think it's at least in the 60s, like high 60s. Something like that. And most likely he's gonna get the wall too because it's Lars. So be very, very careful about this mix-up. If they like the one, if they do the punch, like the fast punch, sidestep it sometimes. But remember that they have options against the sidestep which are really, really good, like the 3+4. The 3+4 is a very, very good option. So be very careful about that. Okay, other than that, let me think about some of the mids. So down forward 1 is good. Well, they also like to do back 2 and down forward 3-3 sometimes. Let's just briefly mention them. So back 2 is a string move, which is a back 2-1. Or a back 2-3. Or is it 4? It's back 2-3. So, okay. So use the... like Lars players use this. Solid, hello. Use this basically for either 1, checking you, or counter hitting you with this extension. So this can be confirmed sometimes, right? And it's a natural, which can be a very good mid check. But what's good about this is that it can be delayed a lot, which creates opportunities for this countered launch right here, right? You might think, oh, the Lars player is done after this back 2. But what's good about this is that you can't avoid this by stepping either side, right? You can't avoid this by backdashing, and you can't really press into it because you're going to get launched by counter hit. And this also deals a lot of damage. Right? Let me just demonstrate it for just a bit. I'm doing a shit combo, but there you go. It's a lot of damage. So be very careful about this. In the neutral though. And there's one more thing that's very, very important to realize, that Lars players, almost all of them, I never see them do this at the wall. So if you see a back 2 ever at the wall, always duck. Because the high is coming. They do this as a mid mix-up because no one ducks this, right? They don't duck it. They don't. No one ducks it because they're usually expecting this. And it wall splats, so they use it as a mid mix-up, which is basically safe because no one ducks it. So if you're at the wall and you see a back 2, if you have the awareness for it, duck this and launch it. Because usually it's -8 with a lot of pushback. But as I said, this only happens at the wall. Very, very important to know. But now let's talk about down forward 3. So down forward 3-3 is a move that Lars players use to cheese with. In my opinion, this move can be actually used as a mind game, but I don't see too many people using it as a mind game. I'll talk about the mind game a bit later. So let's talk about down forward 3-3 first. So down forward 3-3 is a mid-mid, which is not natural, right? It is natural on countered though, so if you get countered, you're gonna get hit. And the big thing about this move is that you cannot punish it most of the time. It's -15 on the dot, and look at the pushback it gives, right? It's a lot of pushback. And unless you're playing someone like, I don't know, who can punish this? I'm not too sure who can punish this, I'm gonna be honest. But if you have like a good 15 frame move with a very, very long range, or faster, then you can punish this. But other than that, you cannot. Someone like us, for example, cannot. Can you forward 4-2 with Reina? I think with Reina you can forward 4-2. I doubt with Jin. I doubt too with Jin. Like with us, it won't work. We're 16. And forward 4-2 adds frames. Back 1-2 doesn't reach. Down back 1 doesn't reach. Back 4 is too slow. We just cannot punish this. You just can't do it. Forward 4 doesn't work either. Forward 4 is 16 frames fast. So you have to know your punishment here. And most people actually cannot punish this. So you have to be very, very aware of what you do. So what happens here is that Lars players do this. If you try to punish this, let's say the Kazuya player knows it's minus 15, tries to down forward 1, right? It's a very common setup that they do this into an arc blast. Very, very common. Just because you try to punish it, suddenly it doesn't work and they just arc blast you. Very, very common. That's why if you want to check him, you cannot punish it. Do a long range move. Or something like 4-4-3 can be good as long as you're fast. Right? So it's a very, very common setup. The Supreme Lars player did it. Everyone does it. I see Kazuya doing this. He did it against me offline. He did it. Of course it didn't work. I knew the setup, but he did it against me offline. So yeah, everyone does it. If you see a Lars player, they can't do it. So just be careful about down forward 3-3. Because for example, Kaz cannot punish this. He cannot punish it. But let's talk about the mind game that almost no one uses. The mind game here is pretty simple. Since you're kind of afraid of this and respecting it, he can go into the stance. It's a very, very simple mind game. Since you're respecting the second hit, he goes into the stance to mix up. And we already covered the stance mix-ups, right? He can stomp here, he can 2 here, or he can, you know, do all the stuff I talked about dense stance, this stance right here. So that's the basic mind game. Okay, I talked about most of the mids. Let's talk about his lows. So his lows is what his kind of weakness is, like kinda. It's not as much anymore because he has this now, which is super strong. And he has this now, which I already talked about, right? Which is also very good. But his neutral lows without stances are a little bit iffy. But they're not that bad. So down back 1, I think I talked about this when I was covering this stance transition, is a good one. It's a very, very good one. Because when I talked about down back 1-3, usually you want to duck this and launch it, right? Usually. Because you don't want to, you know, let him pressure you. You just want to get as high damage as possible. But what's possible for the Lars players to do, I personally use this a lot, is just down back 1. Because this has a lot of range. It's pretty fast. It's -1, just like the whole thing. It can track sometimes, depending on how you use it. It's like very slight tracking. And it's only -12. So let's say you're expecting the high and do a while standing 2. That will not work. You'll actually get launched for this. So you have to be very, very careful. You have to actually react to this high and then launch it. If you don't see the high, you while standing 4-4. Of course, you can also option select. So let's example, he does this. You can just mash 4 here. You will not get hit by the high. There's no mix-up. You can also just mash 4 and it will always punish it. But of course, you're going to say no to a launcher like a while standing 2. So you have to be very, very careful in that situation. Okay. Alpha, thank you for following. Okay, I talked about down back 1. So usually you do want to step this, usually, but it's not easy to step. As I said, the Lars player might do like some homing moves and stuff like that. I'll talk about homing moves immediately afterwards, by the way. Okay, so down back 1 is one of them, and the full crouch move. This move is also one of the best ones he has. Which, as I talked about this before, that he usually mixes this up with while standing 2. Or if he feels gutsy, or he feels like a hard read, or he just knows you're gonna duck, he's gonna do while standing 1, which is a normal hit launcher, right? So full crouch down 1+2. This is the 18 frame low that does 24 damage. It's +1. And creates like a +1 mind game situation because both of you are standing here. And one of the most common things Lars players do is either, you know, a jab check like 1-2 or 2-1 just to check you, down forward 1 check for the same reason, just to check you, or they do a homing move like back 1. I know I said I'm going to talk about homing moves a little bit later, but this is an important mind game. Like, they can actually back 1 here just because it's so common for people to step him afterwards. So this, back 1, common. This 2-1, also common, basically like a jab check. Or jab is common. Or the most common thing that usually good Lars players do is either a backdash or a sidestep. So it's very, very useful for you to know the mind game situation here. You're only -1, so sometimes you press, but sometimes you just move, and sometimes you pressure him back. So it's mind game situation. You understand what it means, basically. And the mix-ups I already talked about. It's while staying 2-1, just while staying 2, or while staying 2-3, which is new. Oh, and I almost forgot about while staying 2-3. This is also one of the transitions to this stance. I forgot to mention this. There are too many transitions sometimes. So this transition that happens here is the same one after this. Into an immediate mix-up. So this becomes +6, and you can't really do anything about this mix-up. More or less you can't do anything. It tracks really, really well in this situation. Okay. That's one of the lows, and the biggest low he has, well, the second biggest low, is down back 4. And they use it a lot. Lars players love to use this. This is usually used as a panic tool, which will, high crush a lot of your options, or a keep out tool. I mean, some people use it as a mix-up tool. They will literally use this as a low, but not that many people. But you have to be aware that this move can crush most of your highs. So, for example, something like this, right? Or 1-1. It will beat you, and you will get countered. That's usually the reason Lars players use this. High crush property, +5 property, and countered launch property. Of course, very risky. I already showed it that it's -26 on block, but they use it a lot. And it's hard to punish, especially in longer ranges. Let's say a Lars player does down back 4 pretty far away, right? That's hard to punish. Something like down back 1 is a very good punish for it, which is new, right? This is our new move. But even this doesn't reach most of the time. If you want a good punish, you have forward to it. This is the best way to punish this. For a Kazuya player specifically, though. So you have to be very, very aware of the down back 4s and punish with forward 2s. That's your best punish. Forward 3 will also work, but forward 2 is way more consistent. And it's just better reward in general. So that's about down back 4. And also, this move basically tracks. It's basically tracking. It doesn't have the particles for a tracking move, but it's basically tracking. You can't sidestep it most of the time. Okay. And now let's talk about the biggest low he has. It's forward 4. This move. This is basically his hell sweep. So forward 3. This is a high damaging hell sweep, which leaves him in -3. So basically you just go back to neutral. You're in plus, you may even pressure him back after you get hit by this. But he has another option, which is new, which is forward 2, which transitions into this stance. And you already know what this means. This means either a stop, 2, or just stance mix-ups in general. So that stance transition here is really scary, because it's +9 into an immediate stop that you can't do anything about. So be very, very careful. Just plug. Nah, bro, nah. We Giga Chads out here. We don't plug. We one and done. That's what Giga Chads do. Okay. What else to say? So that's it. Mix-up is very strong. I already covered the stances, so you guys know. There's heat left, I know, but I'm thinking... Oh, there's one more move. I almost forgot about this. Full crouch down forward 2. This is also one of the best mids he has. I should have mentioned this in the mid section, but I almost forgot that this exists. So this is also one of the mid mix-ups they can do for full crouch, which is a safe option. It's a 15 frame mid, +5 on hit. Or hello. And a -8 of block. So it's safe, but the big thing about this move is that it's a countered launcher. So it's a very, very good move to do in those situations. Whenever he's full crouch, expect this kind of stuff. The same with this situation. For example, this into full crouch down forward 2 can be a thing. Also, something like this is a very common setup. Very, very common. Because if you do try to press something here, you are going to get countered. Even the down jab will trade here. And you cannot step this. It's a very, very strong flowchart. Because you can't do anything against this. You can, I mean, Technically, you can do something against it. I think you can crouch cancel punch parry. Or crouch cancel power crush. Technically, you can, right? Or rage yard will work, but it's very, very strong otherwise, because you have to crouch cancel there. You're forced crouch. So normally it's a very, very strong move, and it's very, very safe for the Lars players to throw out. Counter it launching mid, that's safe. +5 on hit. It's very, very good. But the other most common thing they do after down back 4 is a wall staying 2. And I already talked about wall staying 2 and all the shenanigans it can do with, you know, this, and the follow-ups. Basically expect those kind of stuff. I'll do crouch cancel, you tap up. Just tap up and then do your move. Correct timing though. Okay, now let's talk about the heat. Maybe I missed something. There's too much to talk about this guy. So now let's talk about heat. So what his heat does, which is like the strongest thing, one of the strongest things he has, is that he makes this stance right here stronger. So that low becomes this one, which does more damage. Yeah, I will mention 1-1-1 in the heat section right now. This one right here, it's still -12 by the way, and the mid version is an instant launcher, and it's still safe by the way. So all the options that I said about this one, like 2-1 for example, not the options but all the properties that I say, they change. Like this does 30 something damage, changes sides, and this automatically launches you. So the mix-up becomes way scarier, way scarier. So you have to be aware of that. That's one thing it changes. The second thing is that, I'll talk about the heat smash later, but he also has a power crush. I don't know how you can do it. There you go, this one, which is very annoying to deal with. So people asked me once about how to deal with this move, and I actually answered them. You can't. You can't deal with this move. Because this is a power crush that comes out very fast, and has million range, you basically can't evade it. And most of the time you won't be able to sidestep it. This is actually steppable. I've seen this getting stepped before. But most of the time, we will not step this. But now let's talk about what this move does in general. Let's do this. Like this. So it's a power crush that's mid-screen. You can't do anything against it, right? It's a power crush, obviously. What you can do is maybe throw him if you get the timing, right? Something like this. But it's very hard to do something like that. So they do this. They're +5, as you guys can see. And they are stuck in this stance. This one right here. Which is the same stance I talked about. The Sen stance. This one. So what happens there? Usually, you will either get mixed up by that stance with this low, or you know, this mid. Usual mix-ups. Usual ones. But one of the things they can also do, which is way scarier, is that they can do this stance into the flip, which enables these moves, which are, you know, buffed up by the heat. For example, this stance low, because you're respecting the Sen stance, right? And they're gonna mix this up with the mid that normal hit launches. So this can be very scary. Just be aware of what's happening and choose your options accordingly. It cannot be easy to always deal with this, but at least you know it's coming, right? Afterwards, Sen stance, if they spin, you can sometimes react to it, but it's really hard. It's really hard. Okay, that power crush is very strong. Let's talk about the heat smash a bit as well. So let's go in heat, jab, heat smash. The jab, heat smash, this actually can be sidestepped most of the time. And I think it's easier to sidestep to the right than to the left, but both sides it can be sidestepped. But the big thing about this heat smash particularly is that it cannot be punished that easily. Because he jumps very far. And I mean very far. So you have to actually just wave in. To punish this. And sometimes it just doesn't even work. Like punishing this on whiff is very hard. It's very hard. Because not only can he do that, he can also transition into this stance right immediately afterwards. So he just dances around and escapes you. So it's gonna be very hard to whiff punish this, but it is avoidable. I think it's easier to step to the left maybe, or to the right, I don't remember, but I think it might be left. So you have to be careful. Run electric. Yeah, but as I said, he can also transition into this. when you guys actually step it in real matches, if you guys step it, you'll see why I mean. It's gonna be very, very hard to whiff punish, so be very careful about it. Very, very careful. And now let's talk about some of the heat dash moves. And I think that's gonna be it. So 3+4 is one of the good ones he has, which is a jumping mid. 17 framer. Wall splat, -8, good pushback. Right? So this is a heat dash move, and it just normally launches. Combo shit, obviously. But it just normally launches and it can deal a lot of damage, and most likely it will go to the wall. So be careful about this move, and usually the way you can beat this is you step it. Right? The Lars player can either use this as a low mix-up, or as a jumping move, but I doubt the jumping move is that good. I think the jumping frames are not that much, if either at all. At all there. Okay, so 3+4 is very good, but the most common one I see is either 10-1-2, this one, which is also a heat engager, right? So this heat engager into a combo, because of course it's combos, why not? So let me just demonstrate that. Let me record this. Then 1-2 heat engager, there we go. So they just do this. You cannot step this. I already talked about this move, right? How BS it is, because you cannot step this. And you have to duck both of them. That means you're committed to a duck. Because if you block the first one, you cannot duck the second one. And also, you cannot punch parry this or anything. Yeah, it jails. It does jail. That's why it's so strong, and you will see Lars player doing this so much. So this is one of the most common things they do for heat dashes, and the second one is 1-1-1. And why do they do this? Well, they do this because there's no risk to 1-1-1ing. So 1-1-1 usually is -12, but when they have heat, they don't even think about confirming it. Like normally, good Lars player would do 1-1, confirm the hit, and then finish it. But when they're in heat, they don't even think about it. You just finish it into the heat dash. So let me demonstrate that as well. This into 1-1-1 heat dash. There we go. So 1-1-1 heat dash, and instead of being -12 like it usually is, suddenly it's +5. That's why they don't even bother confirming it on counter hit. But the one counterplay this has, which is a very, very important counterplay, because they do it so often and so predictably, is that it's parryable. It's very, very important for people to know this against Lars. 1-1, you can parry the last hit. There we go. I just messed up the timing. This is very, very important because all Lars players just throw this out in heat. It's very, very important to do this, just so they don't do this kind of stuff. What's Kazuya's punch parry? 4 to 1+2. And this is very important for any kind of character as well. If your punch parry is good, it's particularly important. Let's say you're playing Asuka. Important to punch parry this. You're gonna get a launch. Or June. Or someone else. I don't know. Fang, maybe. Or Jin. Jin's punch parry can work. I think his normal parry can work. So parries are gonna be very useful in this situation. There are many other situations where there's many other characters that parries are useful as well, but usually, not usually, but against Lars, since we're talking about Lars right now, it's very, very useful. Okay, what else to talk about? There's also Orbital. Maybe I should mention this a little bit. This move, I didn't really mention this almost at all. It's basically a low crush move that the Lars players might use from long range just to catch you doing something. It's used either as a keep out sometimes, or as a low crush move if you try to do like a down back 4, down back 3 Escas, for example, right? Or Hell Sweep. So be careful about this move because it's also safe. Let me demonstrate it. There you go, -8. So yeah, be careful about this move. The way you usually beat it is you either jab float it or sidestep it. Sidestepping it is usually the way to go. Or of course you can use mids against it as well. But I think that's it. I most likely missed something. Damn, this was a long one. Yeah, that's an offensive orbital basically. This was a long one, but the stances, there were like way too many stances. I had to talk about them. So yeah, YouTube, big thanks for watching, guys. Big thank you as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one.